Welcome, folks. I'm glad you could join us tonight for the New Jersey Turf Association webinar series. My name is Mike Reed. We're glad you're here. I'm going to be your host for tonight's sessions. First, I'd like to start off by thanking all the sponsors. Without their generosity and support, we wouldn't be able to provide this webinar series at no charge. So we're pretty excited that we get to do this. And we're not only doing it for our membership, it's really open. So if you have somebody that's not a member of the Turfgrass Association and you think they'd be interested, send them the link. The more the merrier. We welcome all comers. Tonight, we're going to make sure that everyone's phone is going to be muted. I just muted it, but if something goes wrong and you sign on after I've muted the phones, please make sure you mute your phone so we don't have any type of feedback during the presentation. We want you to submit all questions in the chat box. Because the microphones are off, it's sometimes hard for you to ask questions, so type them into the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, at the end of the evening, we will take the time and go through all the questions that are in the chat box and ask Rich those questions, and he will answer them. Tonight, for CEU certification in the state of New Jersey, we are mandated to give pop-up quizzes. Now, I don't want you to think these are tough quizzes. These are rather easy quizzes. They're going to be giving during the presentation. It's not or pass or fail. It's just to validate you are present. So if you do not answer the quizzes, and you won't get credit for tonight's class. So make sure you answer the quizzes. We have another hurdle that we have to overcome when we're in the class to get credits. We also have to take a picture of yourself holding your driver's license or some sort of federal ID with a picture on it, and CC needs to have it emailed to her. So get out your driver's license, take a picture of it, and sometime between now and the end of the evening or within 15 minutes of close of the class, we need you to email a picture of you holding your driver's license or some sort of government issue license. Yes, Fran, you're going to be getting PA licenses credits for tonight. And so her email address is listed on the screen. So as far as accreditation goes, we got some good Pennsylvania credits for tonight. We got some good New Jersey credits for tonight. But you may notice that we are missing New York credits. It's not that we didn't apply for them. They just have not sent us back any information giving us accreditation for the classes. And so the state of New York has been a little bit difficult to get credits from. It's not that we didn't apply. We just weren't successful in getting them in a timely fashion. So I do apologize to the group. Tonight's speaker is Rich Buckley. Rich Buckley runs the Plant Diagnostic Lab and Nematode Detection Service at the Ralph Geiger Turfgrass Education Center at Rutgers. I mean, he's got decades of experience working in one of I'd say, the best diagnostic lab in the country. He is so highly regarded, he's asked to speak all over the country. So we're really lucky to have him here tonight. Rich, welcome. Thank you.
Howdy. Hi.
Howdy, nice.
Great.
So, Rich.
Great to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you. I guess my first question to you is this. I may have asked this once prior. How many Dead concerts have you gone to?
How many Dead?
How many Dead concerts?
At least 200. At least 200 with Garcia live, and then there's been a bunch of stuff since, maybe 20 or 30 since.
You've gone to a few. So yeah. So hopefully at this point you should see the screen has been changed over to you, Rich.
Yes, yay! I was wondering how to share my screen, but now I see that I can do that.
Click that button.
I see a couple people still alive, awake. That's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
So did you get are you seeing my screen?
I am not seeing your screen as of yet, and now I am seeing your desktop with the PowerPoint behind it. And
there
now I'm
go.
seeing your screen again.
All right, you good?
Nope, not yet. We can't see anything.
How about that?
No.
Come on, showing main screen.
Now we can see it.
You can.
Yep.
Okay. Yay. Let me move you guys out of the way. And all right. I'm here to talk about dead stuff. And so I'm just going to jump in with a little bit of an advertisement, I guess, for the lab. And so, you know, we've been around since 1991. Ken Krauss is in the audience. I think I saw his name and heard his name. The other person with hair like mine, or at least he did for a while there, got a little bushy. He was our first client in July of 1991, and we're program designed to solve plant problems for people. It was developed in the idea of Dr. Bruce Clark and Dr. Ann Gould. They needed to offload some of the extension outreach, and I was in the right place at the right time, and was there right from day one in the laboratory. And we're here to solve plant problems for people. Of course, there's two of us. Sabrina has been with me for 22 years. She only looks like she's 22 years old, but she's been my assistant. Occasionally we have students help us. At this particular time, we don't have anyone, so it's just the two of us. And we do a number of services. Many of you have used over the years, disease and insect pest diagnosis being our primary outreach. But we do everything. You know, we ID bed bugs. People send us weeds, molds from houses. We have been doing a lot of fungicide resistance screening in recent months, and you know, other services by contract. I do a lot of talks, and they're pay for services to help run the lab. We're 100% cost recovery program. And so I'm a mercenary. If you need something, just call. Samples, of course, come in every day. We got some spruces today. That's me about 10 years ago, and that's a normal load for a day in the summer. Most of those containers are putting greens. Cup cutter plugs. I know it's August because there's some oaks there, bacterial leaf scorch, something we do a lot of. And since the inception of the lab, this particular graph reflects every sample that we ever had. We're just shy of 60,000 samples. And as you can see, most of the work comes in the summer, June, July, August. There's outliers here. These outliers reflect samples that come in surveys. We work with the Cooperative Agriculture Pest Survey that's run by the state of New Jersey. We also work with the National Plant Diagnostic Network, APHIS, PPQ, the U.S. Forest Service, Customs and Border Security. So we get samples from a lot of different places outside of the New Jersey, you know, turf and landscape industry. You know, as far as submissions go, New Jersey is an urban agriculture state. The turf and ornamentals, 92% of the samples that we get a little bit of fruits and vegetables. Most of that 8% are blueberries. The blueberry growers tend to use us quite a bit. 40% turf out of 60,000 samples means I've looked at more dead grass under a microscope than any other person in the world, something like 24,000 samples. But that's not even half. Ornamentals account for the rest. This year, samples were down a little bit. You know, you can see from last year about 600 less. You know, 2,400 to 1,788. And that's a reflection of some of the survey samples that we didn't get. We only got about half as many as we usually get. State Department of Ag didn't have people out in the field putting out traps and things, and so we didn't get them. We had about 100 less golf turf samples. You'll see in the next slide. And then we had a couple of hundred samples less from the ornamentals, and we were looking at, you know, who sent samples and who didn't, and the largest clientele that was missing this year was folks that do arboriculture, the arborists, and I don't know what made those cats so busy that they couldn't send some samples, but I've talked to a couple people and they said that they were busy, and with folks at home, you know, the homeowners are following them around the site, and you know, everybody was a little bit more stressed maybe because of it. As far as golf turf, again, you know, you're looking at about 100 samples less, and you know, that the turf grass samples actually were in, you know, the historic range. You know, at least the last 6 or 7 years, we're right in there with an appropriate amount of dead grass. So it's a pretty normal year that way. We got kicked out of the lab early in the year. You know, but by April, Rutgers had closed down because of COVID. Everybody was closed down, and we were trying to struggle to maintain our service. So that's my second bedroom, if you know, right through the door behind me. And I set up my lab, brought some microscopes home, and we started getting the samples sent to Sabrina's house. They were forwarded from our post office box and forwarded through Rutgers to Sabrina's house. And then I had some people dropping them off on my porch and stuff like that too. It's funny because I was doing samples here, and I got some golf turf out my back door from some pretty famous golf courses. I can show you the plugs. So I got some bent grass mixed in with my landscape turf out there. So
that's got to be a question I have, Rich. You do this for a living. Do you have like the nicest lawn in the entire neighborhood?
Oh hell no! I moved into a condo because I couldn't take it. You know. And you know, I'm a nightmare for everyone who works in my neighborhood. You know, we have an HOA, and every company that comes in, you know, I go to the meeting and somebody's like, "Hey, I know you," and I'm like, "Yeah, don't say anything stupid." And so, but you know, it's an HOA, and everything sucks because we go low bid. So don't be that guy. But anyway, I'm cracking myself up. So here's the first question, and I don't know if you can see me. I can't see myself. But this is I guess you got to answer these questions for your credits. And so, which rock and roll band is well represented on the wall?
So you're giving this one away. I'm going to launch the quiz now, everyone, and the answer is in that picture. So you have less than a minute to answer that easy question. So please submit your answer.
The Bee Gees, man. What the hell?
You left me a little bit of room to put in what I wanted, so I did what I wanted.
I have the Saturday Night Live album over there on the bookshelf.
Saturday Night Fever, yeah. I thought I was more of a Bangles guy. I figured the Bangles were more your line.
Yeah, and note that in the slide here that the cannabis leaf is diseased. It's not burning.
They can't see it right now. All they can see is the quiz.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I close it back up, which will happen in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're done.
All right, there you go.
So hold on, we got to review. Before we move forward, Rich, we should review. And the average score was a 96. Someone did choose the Bengals for you. Sorry to hear.
That's the rebellious there. You're right. The election was rigged.
Absolutely. So you're back on, sir. Go for it.
Yeah. All right. So so I'm working in the cannabis trials now, and it's a lot of fun because that stuff grown outside gets covered with diseases. It's pretty cool. So your CBD is definitely sprayed. So anyway, so I'm working at.
Do we have a lot of cannabis farms in Jersey now?
Not yet. not yet.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's on the way, and Rutgers is working to come up with some production guidelines. And
Mm-hmm.
we're doing variety trials and disease and insect pest stuff and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of fun. Of course, working in the field, you get covered in the smell, and the plots are up at Snyder Farm in Pittstown, and I always feel like I'm going to jail the whole drive home because I smell pretty damn good. So, but anyway, so here's what happened, right? So I'm working at home, and Golf Course Industry Magazine interviewed me and took a picture, and Dr. Clark thought it was pretty cool and started showing the article to everybody. And then suddenly I get this email from Rutgers Environmental Health and Safety, and they were like, "You can't do that. You can't work from home." And that got me classified as an essential worker for ag and ag markets. And we were back into the lab again by May after being at home for about 5 weeks. And so we started normal operations in May, and things started to pick up, you know, certainly with the golf turf. We started getting mail deliveries to the Rutgers post office and that sort of thing. So we were back to normal by May, and Sabrina and I, you know, were working in the lab. The farm is closed, so we set up a flatbed outside, and you know, when folks would drop off samples, they would just call or text the lab, and we'd run out there. You know, clearly you see who ran out there, not me, but I did sometimes, but you know how it is. And so we're getting samples that way, and this is the protocol still. I mean, you can send to FedEx and UPS. It comes to Rutgers post office, and or you can drop them off outside the lab, outside the farm gate, and we'll get them. All the instructions are on the website, of course. Now, for ornamentals, I mean, that's primarily what I'm going to talk about here. One of the things that we've done since 2001 was we had a grad student a couple years ago, Mary Babiez, and she started searching her data for information. One of the first things I asked her to do, I said, you know, tell me what plants come in most frequently, and so she ranked them, and this is the top, you know, 30, and oak is the #1 submission, and that's because we get bacterial leaf scorch, and historically we've done a bunch of survey samples for bacterial leaf scorch in oak for the FAR service and for other states, and so that number's artificially high. But if you go down, you got boxwood and rhododendron and spruce. These plants are driving the train here, and they have been for a long time. They've historically been the most troublesome. It's interesting. We've got a sample from every plant group on this list except for Douglas fir this year. And we've been hammering on Douglas fir growers, the Christmas tree guys, for about 10, 12 years, not to grow Doug firs, you know, switch over to true firs or grow something else, you know, because of needlecast diseases, rab decline and Swiss needlecast. And you know, I'm hoping that finally, after a decade or so of us harping on them, that they finally we're finally using less Doug fir. You know, maybe they're spraying them more, but that's the only plant that we didn't get on this list. We saw a lot of boxwoods, of course we always do, and I kind of want to report on that. We had a late frost, and it burnt up a lot of tips here, and my friend from Syngenta, Mike Agnew, this is his house, and he sent me a couple pictures. He's like, what is this? And it's just frost damage, and you can see it's confined to all the new growth. You know, generally what will happen with something like this is you'll get a pathogen like Volutella moving in onto the dead tissue and kind of grinding away at the plants over time. So, you know, one of the best things and what we recommend to Mike was just shear off all the dead and prevent the opportunists from getting in there. So that was kind of interesting. Now, Boxwood Blight is a disease that we've been seeing a lot over the last few years. And we've been keeping track of it. In 2018, we had a big spike of Boxwood Blight samples in the fall, you know, and you can see here that most of the boxwoods that were coming in actually had Boxwood Blight, and that carried into 2019. Not as frequent submissions. I think when we step back again, we get something like this, we start talking about boxwoods frequently in these kinds of forums, and the message I think was getting through. We didn't see it this year in 2020 until October, but for the whole season, we actually only got 4 Boxwood Blight samples. So hopefully, again, the education outreach. I always tell Dr. Clark, he's my direct supervisor right now. I'm like, the more effective my educational outreach is, the less effective my lab is going to be, because people aren't going to send us samples. So and I think it's
you got a lot of samples in, and you think it's because people are changing their cultural practices, or do you think the environment also played a role on the reduction of the disease issue?
I think the environment is a strong component here. If you look at the weather, I got a couple pictures of weather slides. We were really dry through the beginning of the year, and once the temperature gets up to be about 60 degrees, we need some moisture, and the moisture really didn't come until July, August, and so we kind of got past the peak. When it's too hot, we don't see the fungus active, and so the temperature has to kind of come down off the summer heat, and we didn't get the disease until that happened, and we were in the rainfall period. So yeah, the weather, but I also think folks listen. People are starting to be conscientious about it and start to take care of their boxwood plantings with a little bit more. With a little gentler touch, and so that's good. Spotted lanternflies, we don't get them, but that one Sabrina grabbed outside the lab, so they're spreading all over the place. I had a conversation with a gentleman from the Christmas Tree Growers Association yesterday, and he said that his honeybees got into the spotted lanternfly honeydew, and it made his honey taste terrible. But his friend, his friend over in southeastern Pennsylvania, there was so much that his bees were so involved with the spotted lanternfly honeydew that he's actually marketing honey as spotted lanternfly honey. And Tim told me it tastes so bad that you couldn't eat it, but he said those guys are selling it. So so the point here with the lanternflies, let me tell you, if you haven't been in an area where there's a bunch of them, wait till you see them, man. They're a nuisance. In the cannabis plots up at Pittstown, every like couple minutes, I was flicking them off my shoulders and stuff. They're all over the place. So they're coming to a location near you. As far as disease, the spruce is concerning to us because that is a driver. I got this disease. I was in the lab yesterday for a couple hours, and I looked at samples of Rhizosphaera. It's a NeedleCast disease that is sort of a secondary. It's not a really aggressive NeedleCast like Rhabdocline, Swiss NeedleCast are, and Doug firs, but it does do a pretty significant amount of damage over time. And so this thing, it'll affect new growth in the spring, like most of the other leaf diseases and that sort of thing, but it will also get onto needles that are senescing later in the season. So there's kind of 2 periods of infectivity: in the spring on the new growth, and then September, October on the older stress growth. And so you can see here the new growth is healthy, and last year's growth is starting to drop off. And the pathogen takes about a year to get going in the tissues. And once it starts spewing spores, then the needles fall off over time. It usually takes 3 years to start to have a significant amount of defoliation in a spruce. Different than Rhabdocline in Doug fir. You look closely, and it makes structures called Picnia, and they stick out the stomates, and they have little waxy tops on them, and a 10-power hand lens, and you can clearly see this. And literally every kind of spruce that comes in, we see this on, dwarf Alberta spruces, Serbian spruces, and Colorado blue, all of them. all of them get it, and it's problematic. Again, you see the little white caps here. Pretty easy diagnosis. You know, clearly we want you to send them to us, but anybody with a hand lens in the field can see this. And this is the pathogen, you know, under the microscope. You know, I love showing the pictures. Sabrina takes great photographs, and so we like showing you the critters if we can get a look see. And you know, this thing will make a lot of spores. You know, through the 50 to 75, 80 degree range. As long as it's wet, it's spewing spores. And if there's a susceptible needle around, you know, they'll infect it. Now, the needles are cast mid-season. I like this picture. I always like this picture because, you know, it's on a berm, and this is the way these trees are used quite frequently. You know, this is not my neighborhood. But you know, it's where I live in, you know, the condo neighborhood like this, and so you can see that it's drought stressed over here. It's on a berm. There's a lot of stress on this side, heat sink, and on the other side, guarantee there's the irrigation system with pop-up heads blowing water all over the other side. You know, so it sort of creates a perfect storm. You have wet foliage on one side, and you have stress on the other side. And these trees, larger trees, over a period of a couple of years, start to stress and lose needles. And you know, there's really not a whole lot you can do under these circumstances. You know, I'm seriously probably not gonna spray them or something like that. So what can you do is, you know, maintain them as healthy as you can. You know, maybe there should be some trickle under those trees to give them a little water so they can cope with the heat. You know, clearly there's probably some compaction issues and you know, there's stuff that you can't fix. But if you can maintain as big or as well as possible, some pruning, maybe some fertilizer, that sort of thing. Keep them dry. You know, turn the heads away from the planting beds and the foliage. I mean, wet is an important thing, man. Fungi turn on when they get wet, right? It's the on and off switch. The temperature is like the throttle, you know, and so, you know, we want to keep them dry. If we keep them dry, we can keep them turned off. Quickly remove affected plant material. And there really isn't resistance here. And if you're going to spray them, you know, it's spraying at bud break and 2 or 3 times, depending on product. And then it's coming back in like August and spraying them a couple of times for the September period. So, you know, it's probably not cost effective for most people to do that in, you know, in an HOA, or if you're managing a bunch of properties. You know, it's not something that you're likely to do. I mean, it's effective maybe in a Christmas tree production situation, but or a nursery, but generally, again, you know, it's not something that I mean, we recommend it, but you know, we don't. There's another NeedleCast that has been increasing in frequency over the last maybe 5 years. My friend Tim Abbey, who's in Penn State, he's out near Harrisburg. He says that he sees this on every spruce, and we see it a lot. Wouldn't say it's every spruce. Rhizosphaera is on almost every spruce, and this one's on a lot of them too. Now, the textbooks say Colorado blue spruce for Stigmina and Norway for Rhizosphaera. You know, there's plenty of crossover, and again, a lot of samples have both, right? And so, you know, the fungus works in much the same way. This one's a little more aggressive in that it doesn't necessarily need a stress tree. It's most effective at colonizing the new growth. And like, I like this picture because you see the new buds here, the new growth, and then you see last year's disease. And then you see 2 years ago diseased, and that's where the needles are dropping off. So again, it's slow to drop needles, and as long as those needles are there, it's producing fruiting bodies and spores that are going to continually infect the tree. And so you know, we get a little bit closer, and you can start to see the fruiting bodies already, and a little bit closer, and you're often going to find these on green needles. So again, that's an indication that it's more aggressive. With Rhizosphaera, we almost always find it on brown needles. So again, it's more, that indicates that it's more saprophytic or more opportunistic, and this one's a more aggressive or more virulent pathogen. is what we'd like to call it. And you know, and so it's a little bit fuzzy because this thing makes conidiaphore stalks that grow out the stomates, and on the stalks it makes long cigar-shaped spores. So again, you know, you got a little bit of contrast: the rounds with the little white caps on them, and then the fuzzy brown needles, green needles. And so this is a picture. I showed that picture, that last picture, in a meeting of pathologists, and my friend Rob Wick at UMass, he's like, I think I got a picture, you know, an up close of that. And he said, it's got to be Stigmina. And he said, it's not labeled. And he sent me this picture, and sure enough, it's Stigmina. And you can see the conidiaphores sticking out through the stomates, and you can see the spores. And then we get, you know, we go to one of Sabrina's photos, and, you know, you got these cigar-shaped spores. And again, they're windblown and splashed all around and splashed to the new growth. And little by little, the old needles fall off. And we call these, if you want the mycological terminology, we call them dematiaceous hyphomycetes. And that means they're brown and they grow on stalks. And so, yeah, I'm trying to pretend I'm smart. But I'll throw some words at you and you'll go, oh, really? So, and again, you know, usually from the bottom up, that's where it's wet, and we lose, you know, it's funny, I got to get a picture of this from North Dakota, you know, it's all over the place. You know, I'm on my bicycle all over the place, and I see crummy leucon spruces everywhere. So what are we doing? You know, we're trying to keep them healthy. We're trying to keep them dry. We're getting them off the site to remove the inoculum source. You know, there's no resistance here. I always say that, but there's nothing here. And then fungicide treatments. You know, again, a high value landscape, a specimen tree. You know, if you need to spray, it's a bud break spray, and then at specified intervals. You know, something like if you're just using chlorothalonil, you're out there at like 10-day intervals. Spectro is chlorothalonil and thiophanate methyl. You know, maybe you go 21 days and you do 2 treatments, or you know, again, your product choice. Propiconazole, zoxystrobin have labels for this. So again, there's a lot of material that you can use. But again, you know, the key, I think, is to keep it dry, right? So, you know, irrigation heads, that sort of thing, blasting in the canopies, proper plant spacing. You know, if you got a windbreak, you don't have good air circulation around the trees, so that's going to increase the probability of disease. And so again, you know, there's some culture that you can use to help. But again, the way we use the trees sort of prevents some of the better tactics, you know, to help keep the trees dry. Here's a list of
I battled NeedleCast with fungicides for a couple of years, and then I found out that my best results came from a steel 028 wood boss.
Yeah.
Cut the tree down, never had any more NeedleCast.
Yep. You know, and that's what we're trying to tell people, you know, and like, look, I don't want you to use Doug firs, and now I'm starting to go, maybe you should find something better than a spruce, you know, and you know, and that's tough, man. And you know, the other point I would make is, you know, when you go to a choose and cut Christmas tree farm and the tree costs $120, the reason is because they had to spray it 3 times a year for 7 or 8 years before they could sell it to you. And so you know, again, it's a costly, maybe, you know, if you got to spray it to keep it looking good, maybe you ought to grow something else. You know, it's kind of how my point of view is. Now, one more thing here about spruces and stuff. This is from my Twitter feed, and my friend Lee Butler down at North Carolina State. He's a diagnostician down there. He's a great dude. If you got Bermuda grass, send it to him. I mean, he's an expert in warm season grasses, and he tweeted between 35 and 40% of putty green samples submitted are diagnosed as no disease activity. That diagnosis is just as valuable. So, you know, when you get there's no insect or disease, realize that's a decision that we made, and that's a good thing, really. At Rutgers, 36% of all of our turf samples, but from year to year, it's the same as Lee, 35 to 45. And that kind of carries over to everything. About 45% of all the sand. And if I talk to my friend at UD, Nancy Gregory, she'll say, oh yeah, 40%. Nate Walker in Oklahoma, same thing. Kaminsky says same thing when I was just emailing with him the other day. And so, abiotic stress is a huge issue for us. And spruces don't like it hot so much, and they definitely don't like the winter that we're having now. They don't do well if they don't acclimate appropriately to cold weather. And once they acclimate, it has to stay cold, and it's not, I was out this afternoon and it was 50 degrees. That's not cold enough to stay acclimated. We need another month. And it's going to be 20 next Tuesday or something. And so abiotic stress is an issue. Now, one of the things that you'll note, and I think that this is important for all of us to kind of keep up, is that as far as rainfall was concerned, we were below average during the winter and spring, right? You can see it from the state climatologists. And so that had an impact, right? What's interesting about this, if you break it down by month, you'll look at March, and there's 18 days in March with measurable rainfall, right? But we were still below average. So that means it was just overcast and misty, like for 2/3 of March, right? So again, that plants are stressing because there's not enough moisture, but the foliage is wet and drives pathogens, right? So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy here with this kind of data. Look, once we hit July, it's been raining ever since. So hopefully the precipitation stays dry through the winter, because I hate snow. And so then you look at temperature data, and anybody wants to deny that we are warming up, all you have to do is look at a series of these charts. The warmest July ever, the second warmest summer, the seventh warmest winter. It's warm now. These average temperatures are driven by night temperatures primarily. It stays warmer at night than it used to. So in the day, you're like, oh, it's 90, it's not that bad. At night, 75 or 78 when it used to be 65. And so that's what drives this. But it was hot and it was dry to a certain degree, and that in itself causes the interior needles of conifers to drop off. Particularly the heat, and so it looks like NeedleCast, and that's why I'm kind of talking about it here. And we see it on all conifers. Needles are supposed to drop off anyway after the stress. They just drop off fast enough so that we can see it happen. Right? It's so weird. I had to go onto the interweb to get these pictures, but this stuff is all around me. I don't know why I never take pictures of trees. I have white pines right out my door that look like this in September. The interior needles are completely yellow. You got cypress, you got arborvitaes, you got leylands. You got junipers doing it. A lot of the conifers that come in, we're diagnosing with this kind of thing. It's temperature and moisture stress. It was hot or it rained a lot. These extremes push these trees. Their center of origin is in like the mountains of China, and you bring them to Tom's River, man, they're not real happy about it, and so especially if it's hot and it's dry. And so again, another picture, and so again, it's this idea that the older needles are generally dropped. They're just dropping them fast enough, right, at a more rapid rate after periods of stress. So just because you're losing needles doesn't mean it's a NeedleCast. You have to look closer for the signs, look for the pathogens, or get it to us, and we'll look for them for you, and before you make any decisions about that.
So Rick,
so here's a
when you're talking about the temperature change, and you say that's creating more abiotic stress on the plants, do you also think it's driving some of the biotic or fungal pathogens even harder than they used to be in years past? Is it making them more prevalent too?
Some of the things like Phytophthora root rot are much more active at higher temperatures, but a lot of the leaf leaf diseases, it's an interesting question. So I'm gonna spin on it. You know, a lot of the leaf diseases need cooler temperatures, right? You know, 45 to like 65 degrees. But if it's warm in the winter, you know, if you're coming out of winter and it's 40 degrees, you're already in the window for something like sycamore anthracnose. And it could be that 40 to 60 degrees from like the beginning of March until the middle of June, you know, some of these springs that we're having. And so the answer is the increasing temperature in the summer, maybe not, but the increasing temperature on the shoulders of the seasons, you know, the lows are higher. And that puts us in the window. You know, the other thing that happens is when plants break bud and it's cool like that, you know, it takes a long time for the leaves to expand. And the longer it takes, the more susceptible they are to attack, right? So you have this like warmer than normal, but cooler than normal. And it's helping the fungus and hurting the plant a little bit, and that's driving disease. So yeah, it's a good question, but the best answer is like, well, it depends.
Yeah, and so I do not want to claim credit for that. That question was actually asked by Kenneth McPeak, who's obviously smarter than me. Thank you, Ken.
It's a great question. It's a great, you know, but like it's nature, so I have to answer like a politician. So here's the second question.
All right, so I'm going to launch the second quiz. So hold on a second. Launching it. You guys have a minute to answer. So, Rich, I got to ask you. You know, I was a kid growing up. I wanted to be a fireman. Did you want to be a diagnostician? Was that like the dream? One day you woke up and said, "This is what I want to do."
No. That's so funny. I worked in the green industry. My first job was in a Christmas tree farm when I was 13. I worked on farms, and my guidance counselor told me I needed to be a civil engineer because I liked being outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to University of Delaware and promptly failed out of civil engineering school. And so then I thought, well, you know, I want to be a forest ranger. And I was looking at the forest ranger, you know, the requirements, and you had to take an agriculture class. And I was failed out working at a pizza place. And the only one that fit my pizza working schedule was Introduction to Plant Pathology. And I took it and I got an A. And then it was the light bulb went off, and I'm like, hey, maybe I'm going to be one of these guys. And I ran with it, and that's what got me to where I am. So
Very
I wanted to
interesting.
tell you.
So the average score for this quiz, not as good as I hoped. It was a 64%. So the question was, name the #1 most common diagnosis that Rutgers labs and most other labs around the country make every year. And the correct answer was abiotic, diseases that were mostly brought on by environmental stresses, not by fungal pathogens. So I think we need to maybe repeat that so the audience hears it.
Yeah, I clearly failed in my message. Temperature and moisture extremes do a lot of damage. And that's our most common thing. So don't be alarmed if I send you back a letter that's like 3 paragraphs of saying it was hot. You know, it was hot. The needles fell off.
You know, I know you think it sounds great when it comes back abiotic, but when we tell that to our customers, they think, no, you don't know what you're talking about. But I show this is from Rutgers. This is what they say the problem is. They actually want to have a problem that they can spray to control it.
I think that's pretty common. My golf guys, if I tell them there's no disease, then it's just like silence on the phone. You know, everybody wants to spray something. You know, we got $5,000. Let's spray. You know, so you know, it's not my money. Go ahead. So, well, I keep thinking. So Dr. Clark, you know, I keep bringing him up, but you know, I don't know why, but he told me a long time ago. He says, just tell them it's okay to spray if it'll help them sleep better at night. because it's not going to help the problem. So, all right, now we got to change the channel a little bit. I got to talk about two things that are one that's new and one that we're worried about. All right, so this is a disease called beech leaf disease, and it's actually caused by a nematode, Lyolenchus crenate. And this is a disease of beech, and you can see that this disease was first identified, about 8 years ago in Cleveland metro parks, right? In Cleveland metro parks, and since that time, and you can see that it's spread. And in the last year, we started to find it, in Long Island, and now it's Connecticut. I know it's in Massachusetts now. Diagnostician told me they found it in Massachusetts. It's in Rhode Island, and we have found it in a couple of locations in North Jersey, and we have confirmed that through the USDA and molecular characterization of the organism. It took until the last year or so for us to figure out exactly what was going on with this. It's an interesting new disease that's threatening the beech. It's seriously, like, we lost the chestnuts, we lost the elms. Oaks got bacterial leaf scorch. We got emerald ash borer killing all the ashes. And now we got a beech problem. What's going to be left? I don't know. We'll have to plant spruces or something. And the native range of the American beech is, it's a threat here. You walk into any area, in any wooded area in central North Jersey, you're going to find beech trees. And so we're quite worried about this. And it's caused by nematode, right? And this is from the paper that proved pathogenicity of this thing. These folks in Japan did the work. This is what it looks like in electron microscope. It doesn't show you much here. This is one that Sabrina pulled out of a leaf. Then this sample came from a tree along the Bronx River Parkway, of all places. And so she pulled it out. We got a good photograph of it. So this is the critter that does the damage. We don't know how they get into the trees. There are foliar nematodes in like pine trees, 2 and 3 needle pines, pine wilt it's called. We see foliar nematodes in herbaceous ornamentals, heuchera and stuff. We've even had buddleia with them. There's a foliar nematode in like garlic, stem and bulb nematodes, and it gets in annual bluegrass on the West Coast. We get samples from like Bandon Dunes and Cypress Point and that sort of stuff, and those nematodes. So it's not out of the ordinary for a nematode to be in the canopy or the uppermost parts of the plants. Normally they're in the roots, but it is pretty unique to see. And so this is in there, and again, it has a stylet that makes it a pathogen. And so the leaves that have it have dark bands on them, right? So you can see, you look through the light, and you have these, and so we tease these bands open, and we find the nematodes in there, right? And so again, just my friend Jerry from Westchester, New York, again, it's you see these dark bands. That tree's in Scarsdale, New York. The bands turn yellow and brown as they age. The leaves crinkle up too, because the tissue is damaged as the leaves are expanding, and it thickens a little bit, and you get a little bit of crinkly kind of a leaf. You can see here that the dark areas are raised. Powdery mildew will make it look like that. There's some aphids that'll make it look like that. We're working on a talk of all the things that might look the same, and so as the season progresses, the leaves shrink and deform and drop off, right? So again, you can see trees that have these bands in between the veins of dark green or yellow or brown tissue. This is a good example. These were leaves that Marjorie Daltrey, she's at Riverhead at Cornell, she sent to us just so we could see it. She had already seen it, and we hadn't. And again, it's over time, it's going to thin the canopy. you know, and in a couple of years, the trees are going to thin, you know, to a pretty significant, you know, this one's starting on the left here, and then you can see this one on the right. Neil from Bartlett, I showed some of these pictures at a meeting, and he was texting me pictures that he had, you know, while I was talking, and so again, it's a little bit more severe there. This one's up in New York, and again, you know, this is something that will kill the canopy, and ultimately it'll thin out the trees. You can see in this forested area how much it has impacted the forested area, and we're afraid that this is going to do significant damage to beech trees. So if you have it, if you see something that looks like it, we need to know. So you can send us samples. We have money from the State Forest Service to do the samples for free. I think we have enough to do 200 of them. Rosa, you at the State Forest Service got some grant money to look at this. And so again, we're trying to track it in New Jersey. So if you suspect that you have it, definitely give us a call. Now, oak wilt,
how did it get here? How did it
we
get
don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea. We have no idea how it spreads. You know, we just know that those nematodes are in the trees, you know, and it took us a few years to figure that out even. So no, every question that you have in your head, my best answer is I don't know. So there's some people working on it. The folks that, you know, the same folks that worked on Emerald Ash Borer, Deb McCullough and Monica Soliktis and guy Matt Casson at West Virginia. They're all looking at it, you know, but so far we don't have any information. We don't know what to do about it. You know, my guess is that a material like Avid would work pretty well because it's translaminar and it's decent nematicide. But you know, again, there's no efficacy trials, nothing to recommend. So right now it's just sort of, oh no, let's see where this thing is. And so again, that's why we're talking about to get you guys thinking about it. Now, oak wilt is a pathogen that is not in New Jersey. We're very worried about it. If you understand Dutch elm disease, you can relate to oak wilt. This is a pathogen that came in the country at the beginning of the 20th century. We think it came from Mexico. The center of origin for oaks is in Mexico. Most of the wild type varieties are from there. And the disease is a big problem from Texas up through the center of the country, up into Michigan and Ontario. And again, it's a vascular pathogen. It's a fungal pathogen that kills xylem tissue and causes leaf scorch and thinning of the canopy. So, you know, again, there's a fair amount of disease through the center of the country, right? It's getting pretty close to us here in Pennsylvania. You know, drive into West Virginia, it's about 350 miles when I go out to Morgantown, you know, and you're right about here, you know, and so, you know, again, it's close. It was found in New York State, you know, 5 years ago. And then 2 years ago, we started finding it in Long Island, and now it's in Westchester on the northern border of New Jersey. So we are very concerned that it's going to move down into New Jersey and compound the bacterial leaf scorch problem. And so Rosa has some money for us to do sampling for this, and we're going to do the testing protocols. And so again, it's another free service that we can provide because we got some grant money to do it. And this is the instructions for collecting samples that we've been sending people. We're going to try to advertise a little bit more. You know, this spring we did about 40 samples this fall, and we have not found that. In fact, every sample that we did was positive for bacterial leaf scorch. So again, it's something that we're gearing up to do in the lab for 2021. So leaf symptoms look like leaf scorch, right? Relates to damaged xylem tissues. It really does look like bacterial leaf scorch. You'll get a little bit of defoliation from it. The disease starts in the spring, and you're going to start to see the scorching and flagging and branch dieback in like June, late May and June as the temperatures come up. That's different than bacterial leaf scorch. We usually see the scorching of leaves, in oaks in August and September, right? So if you've seen it early, oak wilt is a suspect, right? And so, it takes in a red oak, it gets in white oaks, but in a red oak, you're going to see the tree die within a matter of weeks to a couple of months. And bacterial leaf scorch takes about 10 years to kill a tree. So then there's this concept that it's early and it's rapid, right? Another symptom that you would be looking for are streaks in the xylem tissue. If you've ever seen a Dutch elm disease infected elm or verticillium wilt infected maple, you've seen the streaking in the vascular tissue, and this is the kind of sample that we want. We want branches just like this, small 1 inch, a foot long, and if they have streaking, all the better. If they don't have streaking, doesn't mean the tree doesn't have it, but if it does have streaking, we're in really good shape, right? And we can get the fungus out with normal lab techniques. Once we confirm it, I'm going to send the samples to my friend at Cornell, Sandra Jensen, and she has molecular techniques to give us some more confidence that we're right, because we're going to be cutting down trees if we find it. Now, another symptom or sign of this is that the fungus forms spore pads under the bark about 12 months after the tree is infected. So you're going to see this in trees that are in serious decline, and it'll start to crack out through the bark, and these spore pads smell really good to sap beetles, nitidulids. Sometimes they call them picnic beetles or fungus beetles. And they come and they eat the fungus and get covered with spores, and they're strongly attracted to sap. So for instance, if you're pruning an oak in June, the sap flow from that tree will attract these beetles, and if they're carrying the pathogen, they'll spread the pathogen. So that's one of the primary means of spread. And the research says that these sap beetles are most active in May and June. And again, that's when you're going to see these spore pads. And if you're doing spring prunings or cleaning up stuff from the winter, you may create wounds that are very attractive to these guys. Now, the last point here is the fungus does grow from tree to tree through root grafts, just like Dutch elm does. And so, for controls, one, we want to know if it's in the state, because we're going to try to eradicate it if we can, right? The Forest Service will come in, cut the trees, right? But if it establishes here, breaking root grafts or trenching, we have in Michigan, they have a no prune, April to July. If you prune during that time, they want you to paint the wounds with wound paint. Like the only time we ever recommend that. Eradicating the affected trees and that sort of stuff. You can debark the trees, and that'll disrupt the spore mats and that sort of stuff. And then like something like Alamo injections will the propiconazole shows pretty good efficacy. So if you catch it early, you prune out the dead, inject the tree, you may be able to persist, with that particular tree. White oaks get it, it doesn't kill them as fast, and the propiconazole injections in the white oaks seems to save them. The red oaks, it's touch and go. So that's problematic. So again,
if you're thinking of using a fungicide program, right?
Yeah.
What percentage of the tree being gone do you say it's too late to get it back? Is it 10%, 5%, 25%?
That's a great question. I would say if it's a red oak, you're looking at no more than about 10%. This is an aggressive pathogen that'll kill a red oak quickly. So you see and spread, kind of. With a white oak, you probably can see considerable amount of canopy dieback. Now, I can't give you a number. It's not like emerald ash borer where we know that like past about 30% of the canopy, you're not gonna be able to draw the material up and get any kind of control. So again, it's a good question, and I don't think it's real well worked out. Most of the stuff that I read about it is talking about how quick it kills the trees. So it's with a vascular wilt disease or like a root rot. By the time you see symptoms, a lot of times it's just too late. You can't fix it, and I call them hopeless cases, and like me, and so anyway, all right. So let me talk. Do I have time? I guess I have time.
Well, you know what? You haven't had one person leave, so you're obviously doing a good job.
Let me talk about. I got a couple.
Yeah, I think if we're the Turf Grass Association, maybe we should talk a little bit about turf.
All right. I got. Here's the list from 2020. The red is the golf turf list. Look, temperature and moisture stress at the top, right? We got a lot of that early. We got a lot of Pythium root rot late when the rains came. We had a little bit of a drop in anthracnose, but it's still in the top 6. Fair amount of summer patch. Fungicide timing is really important with summer patch control. We get breakthroughs if there's any kind of extreme. We see that in lawns too, but mostly in lawns. Interestingly enough, it was brown patch, and then later in the summer, school summer, August, not late September, real summer. We were seeing some Pythium blight, and particularly seedling blights in new seedings. So I figured I'd talk about brown patch, so Rhizoctonia solani, and this is a disease of all grasses. It's an old disease. It's described since 1908. It's a generalist fungus. We see it, of course, in the bents, the ryegrasses and the turf type tall fescues. I call it an Achilles heel turf type tall fescue. You see it in warm season grasses. And what's kind of interesting about the fungus is that this fungus has variants called anastomosis groups. And anastomosis is a term that we use for asexual reproduction, where the hyphae of compatible anastomosis groups will fuse and now swap nuclei. Rhizoctonia has more than one nucleus in every cell, and so they fuse. If it fuses an anastomose, it does its process, then they're compatible mating types. And what we find is the anastomosis group in cool season grasses is different than the anastomosis group we find in warm season grasses. So technically, these are two different fungi causing two different diseases. So what you're going to see is that the cool season grasses we call brown patch, and if it's zoysia or Bermuda or something, we're going to call it large patch, right? So just a little bit of academics here, but just so I think it's important that we start thinking about warm season grasses, because I would predict that before some of us retire, that we'll be growing zoysia or Bermudas in this area. It's just a matter of time. It's warming up, and they're breeding more cold tolerant. They got Bermudas in sports stadiums pretty damn close to us. So again, brown patch. This is on creeping bent grass, makes a big brown patch. I love the descriptive terminology. I always think about Cheech and Chong. Looks like brown patch. Smells like brown patch, tastes like brown patch. Must be brown patch. And if you remember the gig, I'm not necessarily talking about brown patch, but you can see that it makes a big brown patch, and the grass ain't dead. That's the good news. The fungus is more of a leaf blighter than anything else. Now, if you're growing colonial bent grasses, your Dr. Bonos, this is your nemesis, and it hammers colonials. It's too bad because colonials don't really get dollar spot. And if we could figure out how to breed brown patch resistance into the colonials, and I remember Dr. Funk talking about this like 30 years ago, and they still don't look that good. They'd be great grasses for fairways and stuff, but they get hammered by brown patch. It's the worst. It's the most susceptible of the grasses to this disease, and it does a lot of damage. Now, ryegrass, you can see, is very susceptible. The patches can get pretty large, right? But note that there's a lot of green tissue in there. So this will generally recover depending on how long the disease is active, right? The more disease pressure, the more grass you're going to lose. And it might just be the sun desiccation and traffic rather than the fungus itself. Here's a tall fescue, just to kind of give you an idea of how big the patches can get. I like this one. This is out there outside my I live on the first floor here in the condos. If you walk out there a little bit, I made sure we would remember what year it was. It's like I was wearing a mask, so I didn't give the grass brown patch. But this is like August this summer. It was wicked disease pressure we had, and the disease was flaring up everywhere. This is a turf area down in Allentown. We stopped there on our bicycles, and I was like taking pictures of the grass on my bike. Just like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, look at the brown patch. This is awesome. They're like, what the hell are you doing? But you can see it in there. This stands. It's tall fescue, and it would recover pretty well. Despite the disease that was in there, mostly because the park wasn't being used, the way it normally was. There wasn't that much traffic, because if you traffic tall fescue with brown patch, it's going to fail. And again, that's the problem with it. It's one of the reasons Brad Park will tell you, on a sports field in the summer with brown patch, you're going to lose grass because of the traffic, right? And so that's what this picture. I went to this house. This was near my mother's house in Delaware, and one of the tech reps asked me to stop by, and I'm like, there's brown patch everywhere, but the traffic is what killed the grass. And so again, you want to be careful about that. The fungus makes a leaf lesion, irregular shaped leaf lesion, and this is an old common type tall fescue, and reddish brown border, tan, irregular shaped, pretty classic leaf lesion.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
From your naked eye, can you see the difference between some of the older cultivars of tall fescue versus the new cultivars, which are supposedly being bred to be more resistant? And are you seeing a decrease in brown patch infection in the newer cultivars?
That's a good question. I don't think so. But I'm not as familiar with the nuances from cultivar to cult. Like Dr. Meyer might or Philip Vines might have a different answer, but I still think they're pretty susceptible, even though they're working on brown patch. It's interesting because throughout history, there's not really any cultivars that you can say are good brown patch resistance in any kind of grass. So I think the fungus is such a generalist, it's not going to matter. Their efforts are going to be futile. Because Rhizoctonia, it'll get on it maybe 500 different plants, so it'll kill your impatiens, same as your tall fescue. So I'm not thinking it's going to. They may be making progress, but I wouldn't count on it being disease free. Not like something like grape.
But when you're saying a lot of times, if it's not trafficked, most of those turf areas are going to recover. They'll
recover. Yeah, and there's two things: one, traffic, and two, weather. How long is there pressure for that fungus to grow? And so it will kind of get to that in a couple of slides. This is just field 16. We've all been to the turf farm. And this was August 4th, 2010. I remember because they came storming into my lab. You got to come see field 16. It rained 2 inches, and this is what happened overnight. you know, and you see around the outside edges here how it's kind of purple. That's what we call a smoke ring, and the fungus will fuzz up. You can't generally see this in tall cut. You got 3-inch tall fescue, you're not going to see this. But if you're down, you know, under under 2 inches, it'll flare up. You can also, you know, here's another quick and dirty tool, right? You think you got brown patch? Take a plug out of the edge and put in a plastic bag with a wet paper towel, you know, and seal it up and wait, you know, 24 hours. And what you're going to find is that the fungus will fuzz up in a ring across the top. And then, you know, then you can go, well, this is probably brown patch. I mean, the only difference between you and me at that point is I got a microscope and I'm going to put it under a scope and see the right angle branches and go, dag, it's brown patch, you know? And so I just have a little bit higher level of confidence. I'm certainly going to put it in, you know, you saw the slide of all the containers at the beginning. I mean, we put them right into the moist chambers so we can make it easy. We can force the fungus to grow and find it, you know, quickly. Now, the fungus also makes sclerotia.
That leads to another question then. If they put it in the Ziploc bag with the wet paper towel and find out it's brown patch, how big of a check should they be sending you for that test that you did on the spot for them?
Well, you know, it's not only the disease diagnosis, it's also the consulting that they receive right now. And,
yes, okay, so that's going to be a big check.
Yeah, so it's at least worth 2 samples, you know.
Hey, I'm cracking us up. I'm happy.
You know, look, it wasn't my idea to charge. You know, I'll tell you, I'm going to throw Christy Whitman under the table, because they formed the lab during Christy Whitman's term, and she was talking about privatizing state services and stuff. And this was the only way they could figure out how to start a program that was traditionally free and pay for it. So to pay per diagnosis. And we were the first lab in the country to start doing it, and now everybody does it. You know, so I was a trendsetter in certain, for better or worse.
So you guys are all self-funded, is what you're saying?
We're 100% self-funded. Yep, I get some grant money from the feds to participate in programs. I get a little money from Extension to cover some of our benefits. But yeah, otherwise I have to hustle it up, man. So send me samples, keep me working. I'm only 58. I got to keep going. So Sabrina needs a job. So you know, I shouldn't say this, but Sabrina's only other real job was at TCBY. Making I hired her out of a class when she was an undergrad, and I talked her into hanging with me for 22 years. She outlasted both my ex-wives even, so she's got some internal fortitude for sure. So anyway, and which, you know, it's I know she can hear me talking right now, and I'm going to get a phone call later and say, "What the hell did you say?" So these sclerotia allow the fungus to survive. You know, they persist for a long time. That's where I was going with this. So, you know, you get a lot of brown patch, it's going to leave a lot of sclerotia behind, and you're always going to have a lot of brown patch on the site. Now, the fungus is driven by temperature and moisture. Temperatures above 60 degrees. You know, in large patch, you need above 70. But above nighttime, above, you know, we're looking at early June, we're above 60 degrees at night. And then you need leaf wetness for greater than 10 hours, 95% relative humidity, and little rain or irrigation in the preceding 36 hours. So, you know, practically speaking, this is hazy, hot, and humid mid-late summer temperatures, and that's what happens. Second warmest summer, and a lot of rain from July on, and that was just driving the fungus. And so, you know, in a season like this, with so much pressure from the fungus, you might see some dead grass, right? And you know, again, if you're trafficking, it's worse. What else matters? You know, this research from Kansas State, Jack Fry, and I'm not sure Dr. Huang worked on this, but they had tall fescue mowed at 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, right? And at 4 inches, the disease was bad because it was wet all the time. And at 1 inch, the disease was bad because there wasn't enough carbohydrate to recover from the attack. Same thing with nitrogen. We always think about this as a high nitrogen disease. You know, soft succulent grass, you're going to get more. But if you don't use enough, you're going to get grass that can't recover, you know, from the disease. So again, you know, it's a fine line there, but you got to have enough N to keep the grass growing, and that's an important concept, I think. High seeding rates, more disease 4 years out. You know, so what are we going to do? You know, we want to get our fertility right. You know, the science says 2 to 6 pounds per thousand. We all know 4 1/4 is the New Jersey limit. You know, you're at the lower ends with a tall fescue, and you're at the higher ends with a perennial ryegrass. Again, you know, you don't want to get it too soft during the hazy, hot, and humid in the summer, right? And so that's the key with the nitrogen there. Just keep it growing and grow out of it. Keep it dry. I mean, this is just general disease recommendations. You know, mow higher, fix your thatch and compaction problems if you have them. Just driving it home, low end dollar spot, high end brown patch. Here's the colonials next to the creepers, right? You see dollar spot in the, you see some brown patch in there. It's just not as bad. You see the dollar spot here, and then it's just pretty wicked, you know, brown patch in the colonials. And again, we got a lot of fungicides here. They all work relatively well. You know, we always like the strobilurins. We really like, you know, Firm and even Secure is a good brown patch control. You know, old standbys like Gypco and Daconil. You know, they all work relatively well. You know, ProStar is a good product. You know, again, and then we get these recommendations from this publication. If you just Google University of Kentucky turfgrass fungicides, it'll pop up. And this is the excellent thing that any turf manager should have, that has 35 years of efficacy data. And so everything's ranked. And so when I make a slide, it just is a reflection of what this publication says. You know, and so again, you know, a lot of easy, and you know, on a home lawn, in a landscape turf situation, watch the weather, and if it's going to get hot and wet, and you're looking at that, you know, you can proceed. You know, there's even granular materials. You know, Headway has propiconazole and azoxystrobin in it. You know, surgical strike ahead of the weather, and the weather changes, you're growing right out of it. Might only be one shot. You know, it's not. We're not like a putting green where we're starting in May and we're going every week, you know, or every 2 weeks, you know, for dollar spot and brown patch anthracnose control. All right, so this can be the third question, or the final.
And I think that we're going a little over. I think we're going to make the third and the final question, if that's okay.
That's fine.
All right,
man. Yeah, man, I got to put on a dead tape and kick back, you know. So we got to get to go.
So we're going to hide that. So now we're going to launch our next test. Hold up. Bear with me. Buckley, test number 3. We're going to launch it. And hopefully you are reading the test questions as we're going through this.
Test in progress. I moved the talk to the last question.
Nice.
So when you come back,
when we come back, I'm going to grab control of the presentation, unless you got something else you want to share.
I just share this last slide because I've been throwing her under the bus. But my last.
Fair enough. So let's close the test. Let's manage the test.
And so the last question was, as reflected in the photographs and all the photo credits, who clearly does all the work in the Rutgers lab. And it's not this guy, and it's not this guy. And without Sabreena, we wouldn't be the success that we are. So I want to give her some kudos. And I also want to tell you, man, you know, you can see that this is in Atlantic City, and I sure as hell wish we were down there, because we'd be going to like the grassroots hot pretzel and beer drinking fest from the end of this talk, instead of turning around into the kitchen in our own living room. So hopefully in December we'll be doing this in person.
It will be back next year in December. We're actually going to talk about some of the other things that are going to be going on in 2021. We've got some cool stuff that's coming on. So I'm just going to grab back the control. I'm going to show them a second screen. Start my presentation back up. I apologize. I'm one of those people who has to talk through what he's doing.
You know, it's a good sign, man. People are still awake.
They're still with us, so that's a good thing. And hopefully right now you guys should be seeing a slide that says important reminder. Is that what you're seeing, Rich?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank goodness I got it right. So, guys, important reminder: in order to get your CEUs, you must take a picture of yourself holding your driver's license and email it to execdirector@newjerseyturfgrass.org. And in the subject line, just type in Buckley Turf. And that way we know what course that you attended. And you have up until, a half an hour after tonight's meeting ends. Hold on, why is this not moving? Oh, hold on, I got to do it this way. Upcoming events, May 3rd, 2021. Yes, the Golf Classic is back on at Fiddler's Elbow Country Club, so we're very excited about that. If you've never experienced the Golf Classic, I highly recommend you coming out and joining us. Then we have our field days coming up. Tuesday, July 27th is going to be our Fine Turf Day down at the Research Farm in New Brunswick. It always works out to be the hottest day of the year. And then we have it again the following day, Wednesday, July 28th, which turns out to be the second hottest day of the year. And then everything goes well, and I believe it will. We're going to be having the Green Expo from December 7th to the 9th at the Borgata Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. And if you've never made it there, I invite you. It is just a wonderful place. There's a lot of camaraderie that goes on. There's a lot of great learning experiences, and it's just a great environment to go to a seminar. Last but not least, we need you. If you're not a member of the New Jersey Turfgrass Association, I'm going to invite you to join. I mean, besides seminars that we do, we support Rutgers in a fundraising capacity, and so your dues go towards that and supporting our green industry. If you so would like to join us, we also have association committees available, meaning if you want to get on board and you want to serve, we have needs for people in our social media group. We have needs for people in our treasury or accounting department. That it's a volunteer based, but it's something that you can do if you want to help serve our industry. So before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to make sure I got all that information out to you. And I want to thank all of our webinar sponsors again, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. They're the ones who are funding this, so we can offer this up to you guys as a free service. So I now will open the floor to any more questions. And so first question that has come up, Rich, is how about compaction and mower stress for brown patch? So does compaction increase the severity of brown patch?
there's no research that suggests that it does. The impact of compaction would be that the turf grass is less vigorous, so it won't it won't recover as easily. So I think that there's no cause and effect like there is with summer patch when we airify and disease gets better. But most definitely, it's interesting. I read an article today about compaction and root growth, and compacted soils definitely inhibit root growth because it doesn't allow ethylene I know I'm going too far here. It doesn't allow ethylene that the roots produce to dissipate into the soil. So the concentration of ethylene stays high because the pore space is so tight and the roots won't grow. And when the pore space is open, the ethylene dissipates and the roots grow. So again, you have compaction, you have less root biomass, you have a plant that's less equipped to recover from the disease. So yeah, that's a good question.
Absolutely. This is not a question, it's a statement. It's someone is congratulating you guys for being self-funded. That's something to be proud of, that you're able to do it and function at such a high level. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. What works best on long fungus, granular or liquid applications? So which one's more efficacious? Is it granular or liquids?
I would prefer to spray a liquid. You get better coverage. Now, that being said, depends on the product. If you're going to use a granular, you need to have a product that's an aquapedal penetrant. And that means that when you put it down, you water it into solution, and the roots will pick it up and translocate it. Right? If you're trying to use a contact material, because they sell them, you need to stick it to the leaf, and I don't know how you're going to stick a granular. Right? So a product like Headway G is one I mentioned that has azoxystrobin and propiconazole. Both of them are soluble. Both of them are penetrant materials that move in the xylem. And so you put the granular down, you water it in, and plant takes it up. And it's a real effective way of using a granular. But again, that you just have to make sure you're using a penetrant product and you water it appropriately after you put it down.
All right. Next question. Bob Freeman would like to know, what's your favorite dead song?
That's a good question. Eyes of the World. You guys know that? You guys don't know that.
I had not even a clue.
Scarlet Begonias is a good song too, and they play it. Here's a side. Scarlet Begonias gets played into a song called Fire on the Mountain, and the two songs together, it's a song suite. Usually it takes about 30 minutes to play, and so some of you guys will be asleep halfway through. But there's a new dogwood that we have called Scarlet Fire, and it has pink fire-like flowers, and Scarlet Fire is what we call Scarlet Fire at a dead show. So all my deadhead friends want to have the new Rutgers dogwood that called Scarlet Fire. So get one too.
Someone else wanted to know what was because you admitted to having the Bee Gees album. What's your favorite Bee Gees song?
Oh crap, that's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know. That's a great question. But
what's it called? Lonely Days. I'm trying to think of a Bee Gees song that's not like a disco song. From one of the late '60s albums.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, but that's part of my record collection.
Yeah, they can't see your slides anymore, just mine. Sorry.
You can't see me?
No.
Yeah, I have about 10,000 records and CDs in this condo. So,
good for you.
Yeah.
Well, that is the last of our questions, Rich. I really appreciate it. You did a great job. I mean, one of the ways we can tell you did a great job is that people didn't sign off until the end. We started off with 54 and we ended with 54. So You know, that's telling me that you did a heck of a job. So thank you so much. We really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.